Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Best Today podcast. I am Shantae Grant, here on a mission to provide you with information and resources to be proactive and intentional with your time. And today, we're going to talk about something that not only affects our time, but our lives, our healths, our minds. Today, I want to talk to you about something that not recently, but within the last year, learned about, and it's known as the negativity bias. I want to know from you all, have you ever heard of the negativity bias? And if you have, I want to know after this episode if you think of it differently than you'd heard before. So, like I said, the negativity bias is something that I came across in researching and reading. As you may not know, I am an avid learner. I love learning. I love taking the experiences that I've had, the work that I get to do with thousands of women and their real lives, and then reading and learning in areas of science and areas of just really a little bit of everything as it pertains to understanding how humans evolve, think, feel, all the things I'm really interested in. And so in that whole area of study, I came across the negativity bias. And after researching and reading about it over the last few months in particular, I wanted to talk about it here on the podcast. I thought this was going to be a one episode, but I think this one is going to be broken up in two parts because the first thing I want to do is just like I usually say, is start a conversation and give you information. And then after giving you that information, we're going to take it and do something with it next week in episode 18. So here's why I wanted to bring this to the podcast. About every 6 months, we provide a survey to our audience. And one of the questions we ask very consistently is asking for topics or things you'd like to hear me talk more about or teach on and cover. And without fail, every single time we get a large majority of you who ask me to share, how do you deal with or how do you overcome negative self-talk, negative thoughts, negative mindsets? You know that you don't want to do this thing, but yet you continue to speak negatively to yourself, think thoughts that are not helpful, that are negative. And by negative, we mean things that are harmful, not true, unhelpful, the things that you know are not going to aid you in being your best one day at a time and being proactive and intentional with your time and being healthy. That's what we mean by negative. So for me, when I am aware of a problem, or like think about it this way, if you know a tactic of your enemy that they're going to use against you, then you can plan around it, right? It's helpful to identify the problem or the tactic that's working against you so that you can then create strategy or really even undo the thing that they're going to do. Okay, follow me here. I hope you're following me here. But essentially, one of the reasons why I love talking about the things that happen in our lives that we don't want to happen or that we don't want to continue to do is if we are aware of it, you can do something about it. You can't do something about a problem you're not aware of. So the first thing is we have to bring it out to the forefront. And that's what this episode is about. Bringing out to your awareness this negativity bias, which is not a myth. It is scientifically proven. It is a real thing. So we've talked about the human brain many times here on the podcast, and even in my previous podcast, the Business Life and Joy podcast, because I love our brains, right? Our brains help us to literally function and live. And while I love our brain and appreciate its desire to help us to function from day to day, there are things that our brains do that does not help us in our day to day. And this negativity bias is an example of that. So today, my goal is to make you aware of the negativity bias so that you can take the information and understand something that is actually working against you inside of your own body. But again, being aware of that allows us to then do something about it because we can't change what we're not aware of, So let's address talking about what the negativity bias is and how we can take intentional steps to undo the doing that is being done in our minds. Does that make sense? Let me know. Okay, so first step. I've said it like 6 times already. Shantae, what is a negativity bias? In basic terms, like in my own words, it's the brain's tendency to overemphasize and hold on to negative experiences in contrast to the positive, right? we as humans are more likely to, and this is still part of the negativity bias, we're more likely to believe negative information over positive information. We will remember and store negative experiences more than positive experiences and give it more space and weight in our mind. And we'll give more energy and space to negative experiences and thoughts than positive. So think about this. Before you meet someone comes and they tell you 3 things about that person. They say, oh, she's so philanthropic. She's great. She has a kind heart. And she, kicked her sister yesterday in the throat. Random third thing, right? When you meet this person, the negative thing about them, one, you're going to believe that that's more indicative of who they are than the positive. Even if you were given more positive information than the negative, our brain first is more willing to believe the negative about the person, a place, or thing than the positive. But then we also make that the bigger picture of this is who they really are. So think about that. If before you've ever met someone, you heard a lot of negative things about them, that is going to heavily influence you. Even if when you meet them, it's such a positive experience, you almost feel confused. You're like, I feel this thing toward you. I should like you, but for some reason, I just feel like you're shady. And it's because of that negative information you may have gotten on the front end. Our mind is saying, we're going to hold on to this information. Not only are we going to hold on to it longer so that you remember it for a longer period of time, we're going to give it more weight. We're going to give it more space. And so the negative is what you're going to most likely remember and feel. And that's just really powerful when you think about that and be aware of that. And that's, I believe, one of the reasons why I think I've talked about this on the episode about a book I have not read, but I've heard about, and the term is that the body keeps score. And it's really dealing with people who have experienced trauma. But even if we go before trauma, just negative experiences and how our body holds on to those even more than the positive. And so if you've had a negative experience with someone, you may re-feel that feeling when you are around them or when even the mention of their name. And I think that's amazing that our bodies do this, but we have to be aware of it because clearly I would imagine everyone listening, and myself included, will say, I don't want that to be my truth. I don't want negative things and information, particularly false negative information, to rule my mind and eventually my thoughts and my body and my actions and my behaviors. One article that I read talked about the amygdala, which is a portion of our brain, a part in our brain. And I will say, this is really funny. The only reason I know how to pronounce amygdala, I didn't have to go and listen to it be sounded out, is because I watch Grey's Anatomy. And if it's not pronounced amygdala, that's how they pronounce it on Grey's Anatomy. So if it's good enough for Grey's, it's good enough for me. But our amygdala uses about 2/3 of its neurons seeking out bad news. Isn't that crazy? Looking for it, just okay, you can't see me physically because I'm sitting at my desk and this is audible, but looking, just scanning for bad news. It's on alert, looking for potential dangers. And of course, we can see how this is helpful to protect us in our real lives from potential danger. If you're walking around in an empty parking lot and you hear a sound or something happens, our amygdala is okay, here are all the bad things that are probably about to happen. So your body can react, right? Something that, here's one that used to happen to me a lot when I lived alone. Oh my goodness. Tell me if you've experienced this. I would be in the shower and I could swear, every time, without fail, I've checked all the doors, all the windows, alarm is on, but I hear someone moving in my house. And I think that was my amygdala at work, just making up bad situations. And I imagine that, again, that was a mixture of both my imagination and my amygdala at work. But what I want to talk about is what this has to do with you and your life in the day-to-day, in particular, when it comes to being our best one today at a time, and the impact this is going to have on how we talk to ourselves, how we view ourselves, which is going to pour over into all the different facets of our lives. If we know that negative information receives greater weight and greater neural processing than does positive information. Okay. If we know that it is a proven fact that we are more likely to believe negative news and negative information than positive ones. So number one, that tells me why, it makes it very clear why the news is the way it is and the way it reports the way it does, because it knows our brain is going to be more attracted to negative news, whether that's reading negative news, listening to negative news, watching negative news versus positive. It's like they're going to remember this more and their brain is going to seek this out more. So we're only going to report things with a negative slant. Like it really opens your eyes up when you learn this. At Best Today, we exist to help women just like you be your best one today at a time. So each week on the podcast, we are going to highlight your stories and your voices. So let's see what's in the inbox today.
I love my Best Today guide because it has freed me from being constantly busy. I can wake up in the morning and read a book if I want to. I don't have to jump straight into work because I know when that stuff will get done. At the end of the day, there are no more clouds of shame hanging over me, reminding me what I should be doing instead of enjoying myself. I love my Best Today guide for giving me back my free time.
Thank you, Emma, for sharing with us why you love the Best Today guide, and who doesn't want to reclaim that free time, to reclaim the time. Just remember, time is the capsule in which our life takes place. You don't have a second of it to waste. Actually, one of the things I say all the time is there's not enough time in a lifetime to waste time. Speaking of which, don't waste another second. Go to besttodayguide.com today and order your Best Today guide. You can also see inside the Best Today guide, watch me work through the Best Today processes, flip through the pages of the Best Today guide, and more by going to besttodayguide.com. It also helps you to open your eyes up to sleazy marketing that is playing against you and prying against you by talking to you in the negative. So I hope it opens your eyes up in that way as well. But also what I thought about is we're also more likely to believe negative news and information about ourselves. And that's really, really something you want to be aware of. You know, if you now know that you will, let's say we're all human, that we will carry with more weight and for longer periods of time, negative information, negative experiences, negative feelings, negative thoughts. And if we can all agree that we don't want that to be the case because it has a profound effect on our lives, on our health, particularly our mental and emotional health, then can we all agree that we can now take this information known as the negativity bias and what our brain is actually doing and understand, okay, at some point in our lives, maybe when we were primitive and we lived out in the wild or, or whatever, maybe that made sense. We needed to really be on alert for, an elephant stampede or something. But in today's society, amygdala, thank you, but no thank you, right? So if we know this information, here are two things I think we can do. We can look at its effect in our lives in present day and be aware of, okay, this explains why I can't stop thinking about this one negative encounter that happened, despite all the great things that happened in the same day, or why the one nagging thing my mom said on the call or my sister said to me, I won't stop hearing it in my mind. And I know my sister loves me and I know my whoever loves me, but it's that one thing they did. I can't let it go. Like we can now look at that in our lives, or maybe it's the one mistake, quote unquote, that you think you made and you won't let that go. Now you have science to tell you why that is, at least in part, right? That your brain is actually doing that on purpose. So I think the first thing with having information is then being able to look and see how it is affecting you in your real present day and your real present life. And the second thing is it lets you then create an action plan to combat it, to overcome it in your life. Because now I'm aware of what's happening. I'm understanding why this is happening, not because this is so important or because this is who I am. It's because your brain is literally giving more space. It's made more room to hold these things that are negative, unhelpful, unhealthy. So not only does it have more space, it has more weight. You're going to hear it more often than the positive, and that you can't even, I think what I remember reading multiple articles that talked about, like, even if you put in more positive experiences, the one negative can come in and outweigh and outshine all of that. And so I say that to say the answer isn't always just to walk around singing, I'm walking on sunshine, because the one negative thing can really kind of counteract all of that. But being aware of it does help us to, one, analyze how can I see where this is actually happening in my real life? And then now, what can I do about it if I don't want this to be the case, right? I'm going to tell you, I remember so many, like as I've been reading about this and studying it, I remember thinking to myself, let me find places where I've done this. And one thing that kept coming to my mind is a few months ago, I was on a business call with a group of business owners, and I was asked by someone to coach someone through a question. And after I gave my answer, I was very pleased with my answer. I was like, these are my insights, right, on this, based on, my level, my area of expertise. And I gave my answer, and another coach on the call, after I was done, was like, Shantae, I thought you were going to talk about vision because that's your thing. And I tell you, I could not get that out of my mind. I was like, I should have talked about that too, because that is my thing, is really helping people see the importance of vision. And part of the answer to her question, which related to what I was talking about, but wasn't exact. Vision is another area that I could have went and talked about too. And although the entire rest of the call was great and I was able to provide the help to the women on the call, that one comment, which was not meant as an insult, it was an observation. She was just saying, I thought you would talk about this because that's like your thing. And I think that would have been helpful here. Again, the way in which I received it and the way in which I believe those words were delivered to me, it was not in an insult. It wasn't a negative. It was just her observation, but it sat with me the entire day. Like, it lingered, y'all. And I sat there like, why didn't I talk about, that's my thing. I literally get paid to come in and help companies, to help teams, to help individuals work through like understanding the importance of vision. And I just didn't think about it. That was really could have been an important part of my answer that I left out, and I didn't think about it. And I don't know why. And, that one sentence of her saying, Shantae, I really thought you were going to talk about the importance of vision because that's your thing. That just kept playing in my mind, that one sentence, for the rest of that day. And now I can put some science to it, like some reasoning, like my daggone amygdala, like that my brain felt that was something that was a negative or a shortcoming or something I failed to do. And that felt like a negative thing to me. Again, although the person didn't mean it in a negative way, I logically know it wasn't meant as that. And I also logically know that I was able to help the person. And I also logically know I could have then just said, oh, let's talk about vision, right? All those things. But my mind perceived it as a negative comment on a shortcoming, something I didn't do that I should have. And my brain stored it and gave it a home and replayed it to me throughout the entire day. And it robbed me of a portion of peace and of the good that came from that call. How many times in a given day does that happen to you? How many times throughout your life, throughout just even recent months, can you point to where you have allowed that to happen, where you are literally robbed of the positive, of the good, and a lot of times of truth? Because a lot of times what I feel like these negative things that are being held, they aren't true. They're not things that are necessary. They're not things that are helpful. They're not things that are full of truth and that will help you to make progress in your life. And so I'm really just excited that now we have a scientific and medical proof that this is a thing that happens to us and it has a name, because now we know what's working against us and we can do something about it. And so the example I always think about is if you're playing a card game and the person who keeps winning at this game has a thing that they do every time they have that card that's going to bring in a certain card, right? And you're like, oh, I just realized what's happening here. I see what you're doing. Now, if you're aware of that, now you can do something with that information. Now you have this information that you can say, okay, I know when they do that, this is what's happening. So this is what I'm going to do rather than internalizing like, man, this person's just so good. They just keep beating me and I don't know why, or it must be that I'm not that great at it. So that's how I think about this negative bias and having the information rather now than internalizing these negative things that happen to us in our day from our past. And a lot of these things can lead to depression, anxiety, sadness, uncontrollable emotions, negative thinking, negative self-talk. Now we can do something about this negativity bias that we now know of. But before I talk about some of the things that we can do, and again, let me just reiterate, I am not a doctor. I am not a clinical psychologist, psychiatrist, physician. These are my thoughts based on my experiences, having worked with thousands of women and actually lived through, my own life. And these are the things that we'll be talking about next week. So if you're listening to this and you feel that you need medical help because you're suffering from some type of depression or anxiety or sickness, please seek out medical help. Let me be clear on that. But for the general population of us who are listening to this, we can all say, man, I see now how that has happened in so many instances. And I hope you'll take a second to sit, because even if you're thinking of some now, there's so many more beneath the surface that don't appear so apparent, that aren't so apparent, that if you sit for a minute, you'll start to see how this thing has really been whipping up on you a lot. And now we can do something about it, right? Because the negativity bias, this truth that our brain will hold on to the negative and give it more space and make it grander than something that's good, it can cause us to dwell on negative emotions and events even when something positive is present. And we don't want that. We don't want to miss out on all the good things that life has for us and who we are by holding on to something that, like I said, a lot of times isn't true and isn't going to be helpful, something that needs to be let go and moved on with. Particularly what was so amazing to me was that you could have positive right there in greater amounts than the negative, and the negative can still overcome that. And so one thing we know from living life here is however many years you've been here on this earth, life is going to happen, and the day-to-day is going to find ways to deplete you, to confuse you, to combat you, to lie to you, to get you to believe false narratives. And so knowing that, what can we do to continue to live joyful, healthy lives with this negativity bias that's there? I'm going to start the conversation on some things I think that will be helpful in next week's episode, because I want to first give you the space to think through this, like to take this in, because I just find this to be amazing. I find it to be very helpful though. So today is part one. It's just really addressing that and making you aware. And in next week's episode, we're going to talk about what kind of action plan, what can we do to help us take this information and now overcome it? Because I do believe that it can be overcome. I do believe that despite this thing that happens to all of us, there are ways that we can not only function in healthy ways, but there are ways we can overcome it. But first, we have to be aware that it even exists. So that is today's episode. Thank you so much, as always, for being present with me for this week's episode of the Best Today podcast. Make sure you come back next week, or if you're listening before this, just go on and flip over to the next episode. Let's tackle this together. And as always, we want to hear from you. If you'd like to share your thoughts, questions, or things you want me to address in another episode, you can always leave us a message at besttodayguide.com/voice, which we will also link to, and it's always in all of our show notes. Today's show notes will be at besttodayguide.com/17. Until next time, remember that you are capable and you are worthy of being your best one today at a time. And you have everything you need to have everything you want. So go on, shout it out as you live it out. This is what my best today looks like. I'll talk to you again real soon. If you enjoyed this week's episode of the Best Today podcast, you are going to love the Best Today Guide. Our Better Than a Planner guide teaches you how to get clear on what you want, identify your self-destructive habits and behaviors, and intentionally create space to prioritize yourself every single day. Don't go the journey to being your best one today at a time without the Best Today Guide. see inside its pages and order yours today at besttodayguide.com. Even better, when you order the Best Today Guide, we gift you with your first month free inside of the Best Today membership. So what are you waiting for? We're giving you everything you need to trade busy for intention. Go to besttodayguide.com and order yours today and join thousands of women across the globe proclaiming each day, this is what my best today looks like.